first of all, welcome everyone to the first event of this year's Public Diplomacy Symposium, The Politics of Change. My name is Camille Chung, and I'm one of this year's symposium co-chairs. And the theme of this year's symposium is the idea of change and the idea that public diplomacy as a field, as a discipline, is adapting and changing to a world that is dynamic and every day is different. And that's one of the reasons that Jenny and I were so excited about this year's symposium and being able to talk about all of the different things that we will be talking about, including the role of political leaders and how they influence foreign policy and how they influence perceptions of what's going on in the world, how foreign organizations and international organizations play a role in politics, whether or not it's the best thing for a country to have international organizations sort of playing a role in what's going on. And we'll also be talking about digital platforms for civic engagement and the role that things like Twitter and Facebook are playing in what happens politically and socially in the world. And so, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dean Branham, the Dean of the SI Newhouse School for Public Communications, to introduce our first speaker.
Well, good afternoon and welcome. It's my great pleasure to welcome you here on behalf of the Newhouse School and the Association of Public Diplomacy Scholars. And I have to tell you, I am so proud of this group and the students who are involved in this group in our public diplomacy program. It's pretty amazing, the things that they do and their efforts to engage the world and create an intellectual discussion around the issues related to the things they're studying. So it's very exciting, and I commend them for their work and the fact that this is their 5th symposium, and they started all this. It was their idea. All that we and their professors did was say, go to it and give them a little money, and they made this happen. So great job, guys. Today we're actually celebrating the Association's 5th annual symposium entitled The Politics of Change. And to kick off today's events, I'm honored to introduce our opening speaker, Ms. D Sonenshine, Undersecretary of State for Public Diplomacy and Public Affairs. Ms. Sonenshine, who was sworn in this past April, was formerly the Executive Vice President of the U.S. Institute of Peace. Prior to that, she was a strategic communications advisor to many international organizations, including USIP, the International Crisis Group, Internews, CARE, the American Academy of Diplomacy, and the International Women's Media Foundation, of which I happen to be a member. Ms. Sonenshine also served in various capacities at the White House during the Clinton administration, including serving as Transition Director and Director of Foreign Policy Planning for the National Security Council, and also Special Assistant to the President and Deputy Director of Communications for the NSC. She's had a distinguished career in communications and government, including high-level experience in broadcast, print, and online media. She has produced news programs for network television and is the recipient of 10 News Emmys, as well as other awards in broadcast journalism. Ms. Sonenshine graduated from Tufts University in 1981 with a Bachelor of Arts degree in political science. Her broadcast career began at ABC News in New York, and she went on to become editorial producer of ABC News Nightline, where she worked for more than a decade. She's been a contributing editor for Newsweek, and she's the author of numerous articles on foreign policy, many of them published in the New York Times and the Washington Post, as well as other newspapers. Please join me in welcoming to the podium Undersecretary Ms. D Sonenshine. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Dean, for that generous introduction. Congratulations, year 5. You all deserve each other's applause and acknowledgement. Bravo, and please join me in a round of applause for those who've put together this incredible symposium. Thank you to Colonel Bill Smullen, and my other hosts today. I've had a fabulous day at Syracuse University. What a place. It is a communications and public policy hub of activity, and a place that brings together such a diverse array of experts and great thinkers. I am delighted to be part of your public diplomacy community and symposium. I know that Dean Steinberg could not be here, and he is also quite a force of nature, and he is attending the annual meeting of the National Association of Schools of Public Affairs. At least that's what he told me, and that it was compulsory for PADs. But I want to extend my greetings and thanks to Jim for all he does. I'm excited for you. I am really excited for all of you by the range of topics in your symposium. The relationship between public diplomacy and a politically fluid world. And then some upbeat subjects you have, like dance. How does dance open channels of cultural understanding? And you haven't forgotten, nor could you, digital and social media. Yes, they are changing the way we engage politically. All timely topics, and they all fit into this grand rubric we call public diplomacy. Now, obviously, the domestic politics of other countries are critical, and whether or not they're citizens in countries who feel empowered or constrained, uplifted or restrained, open or inhibited. And we have to help build trust and mutual understanding with other citizens. So let's spend a second on digital and social media. Let's grant ourselves it is a connective technology and that our innovation is changing the conditions for just about everything. So we have to be tactical with our use of it and strategic and broad in our thinking about it. It is a predominant mode of global conversation. So people ask me, well, what does that have to do with the State Department and the U.S. government? A lot. Secretary Hillary Clinton, who is here, I understand, in April. Did anyone get a glimpse of her? She's really a neat lady. And she has demanded that we evolve with the changing technology. She calls it 21st century statecraft. And what that means is you take traditional foreign policy tools and give them what social technology gives you, depth and reach. And you do that in an adaptive, innovative way that meshes statecraft and information, communications, and technology into a web, interesting term, or a network of activity. The result is that you retrofit traditional tools, methods, and practices, marrying them up with cutting-edge technology. And suddenly you're leveraging networks and demographics in an increasingly interconnected world. Now, I know I am speaking to an audience of very smart, very soon-to-be public diplomacy practitioners. At least I think. Any of you hoping to be a public diplomacy practitioner? You're in the right place. I'm not going to delve too deeply into this toolbox of public diplomacy, but if we dig in there a little bit, you'll see all the stuff in our public diplomacy tool shed. Social media accounts, Facebook pages, press briefings, speeches, media notes, videos, online materials. It's everywhere, virtually everywhere. Now, suffice the State Department is out there every second with every bite, every click, every tweet, 24/7, working to identify and innovate ways to engage audiences. Because one thing we know is the world is getting younger. So we have to stay young and fresh and creative and inspiring. But what do we use to guide us in this seemingly, at times, cacophonous and busy world? I want for a second all of you to imagine you're on the water, sailing. I had a great image in October. You're just out there in your little boat, you're just sailing. In ancient times, sailors used a lodestar to navigate their way through unknown, uncharted waters. In these times, the unknown seas are different and even more challenging. So we need in this field a kind of modern-day lodestar, some guiding principles, some first principles, to help us understand where are we going. For me, my lodestar is public diplomacy, and I want to try to help you evolve your thinking about what this craft is. First thing you have to understand is even before I got there, Secretary Clinton came in and began to grapple with this. And she knew that we had to not look at diplomacy anymore as just diplomacy. So now we're going to widen the lens to something that she kind of created, a three-legged stool. Diplomacy, development, and defense. Imagine all of them living in one whole integrated community. Not so easy. But she understood that the first thing you had to do, and all of you have had to do this in life, is you got to take stock. You got to kind of inventory what you have. So she sat down and worked through with the USAID Development Agency, and they created a review. And for those who've never looked at this review, I'm going to ask you this evening or tomorrow to go look it up. It's called the Quadrennial Diplomacy and Development Review, better known inside the Beltway as the QDDR. And some people think it's just a report. It was not. It was a process of strategic thinking, a blueprint and a vision for how do you adapt to the new world. Now, it's, I should warn you, not exactly beach reading. It's heavy stuff. But what arose out of it is really important for you and the profession. It answered some questions. One, how do we do better at this diplomacy business? Two, how do we adapt our structures to today's world, address the rise of all these new powers, these new threats, these new technologies, this new knowledge, and how are we going to produce results? It was launched in 2010, and it became kind of an operating manual for diplomacy and development. And within that, my predecessor, Judith McHale, very talented executive from the communications world, built a strategic framework for public diplomacy in this house that the secretary was the architect of. And the strategic framework is a lodestar, because it starts by saying, if you want to really understand public diplomacy, get a telescope. It's so big that you have to kind of really start to scope it a bit. And to do that, you're going to need 3 lens settings. You need all of them working, though, in fluid motion. It's getting pretty complicated, but it's doable. One lens is your short-term lens. Something just happened. It was a noise. Where did it come from? What's going on? That's your short-term lens. Is some news happening? Something happening? That's immediate. Everybody's clicking. Here's another lens for public diplomacy, and it's midterm. It doesn't mean I have to jump up and down right this second, but I need to start thinking about a context for some short-term policies. And I'm going to communicate over this 1-month fellowship, or this summer internship, or this half-year faculty exchange. And then, there's one more setting. It's the long-term lens. That's a hard one, because the strongest lens is the one focused on the future. It's fixed on a future you can't quite see yet. But you think you want to get there. And that long lens is about a relationship with a country where you hope to change individuals for the better, in which you want some sustainable networks of trust to be built between citizen and citizen. And you want emerging generations to grow up with a better and deeper understanding of the United States of America. Short, mid, and long, all working together in this people-to-people engagement. What's the common denominator? People. They're key. You cannot address the challenges of the 21st century solely through the lens of policy. Nope. Gotta have people in mind. Well, you know what? We'll kind of be flying blind, deaf, because on the other end of policy is somebody's life, somebody's community, somebody's country, somebody's nation, and somebody's world. And we're going to have to do this now with physical engagement, just you and me in the room. We're going to have to do it with virtual engagement, just you and me on Skype. We're going to have to deepen and expand and leverage our discourse and create the conditions in which the policies will work. You know what we have to do? We have to do what our mothers told us to do. Set the table. Set the table. 21st century statecraft is about reaching out to the biggest table you can imagine. Thousands of people every single day. Exchange programs, round tables, outreach, religious scholars, NGO leaders, business people, entrepreneurs, students, educational advisors, deans and provosts and principals and presidents. We have to reach and teach. What do we want to teach? How about English? It's a good thing. English language, it's one of the world's most useful languages. Why don't we teach it a lot? And give people one skill set that might help them in some regions of the world. So that's what we're doing in a lot of our spaces overseas, is we're teaching English. But we're doing some more than just that. This is public diplomacy. Everywhere around the world, in 812 spaces, some this big, some this big, some on a university, some in a storefront, some in an embassy. We have American spaces, places where people come and connect. I saw them in China, Pakistan, almost not a place in the world where you couldn't find one American space. We have to use those for interaction and exchange, direct conversations. There's one last thing we have to do, which is something sort of new. We have to explain all this to other Americans. Just when we thought we had enough work to do just getting this overseas up and running at full tilt, I think we have to explain this at home a little bit. And we're going to have to, in a time of limited resources, defend our practices around the world. We are going to have to explain to American taxpayers and representatives that what they're spending those hard-earned dollars on resounds positively to our national security. Oh, there's one last thing we have to do. Just when we thought it would all be fun with the arts and culture and music and film and sports and educational exchanges and entrepreneur stuff, oh, there's another one for public diplomacy. We have to counter violent extremism. There's a small challenge. Yep, public diplomacy is also now moving into the field of combating violent terrorism and extremist thought and behavior. Oh boy, that's a complex one, but we're doing it. We've set up a Center for Strategic Counterterrorism Communications, and it reports to the Undersecretary for Public Diplomacy and Public Affairs. Oh boy, that one means you've got to get on digital networks, and you're going to have to meet people where they are online. And sometimes what they say online isn't so friendly and so hospitable. And sometimes they don't say it in English. Sometimes they're talking in Somali, Arabic, Urdu, Persian. And they're meeting and talking on forums. And sometimes they're spreading some mistruths, some facts that aren't quite right, some perceptions that aren't quite right. And we're going to have to help diffuse unsubstantiated rumors and charges. But what we always do well, we present some facts. Fact. Terrorism hurts people of all faith. It's a fact. It does. Victims get hurt when extremism reigns. Now, I'm not expecting to change all the hearts of all the hateful. But I am thinking I could appeal to some more reasonable people in the online spaces where they are. I could give them an opportunity to be heard, some mutually reinforcing narratives. I could explain what we mean by democratic representation, freedom of speech, and tolerance and inclusiveness, and human rights, and an open economy. Give me a chance. I could tell them how you might enhance prosperity by creating opportunity. I could explain that we're all interconnected and that jobs here and jobs overseas are related. I could even tell them about my values of freedom, prosperity, peace, stability. Might even help prevent something bad from happening. Might even be a proactive measure. It's ambitious, I know. We just can't afford to be unambitious anymore. Can't make small plans. So, as I look around this room, I know there are big thinkers with me. You are ready to be masters of public diplomacy, to educate and be the future leaders in the private sector, the public sector, the non-governmental sector. You're ready to communicate and to listen. You've demonstrated the listening part really well. And I'm pleased that as part of your academic and professional preparation, you're looking at internships and policy-oriented seminars, and that you get that we're in a fluid evolution of relationships with our neighbors. May this school prosper. May I extend my support to the Maxwell School of Citizenship and Public Affairs, to the Newhouse School of Public Communications, to the team and your extended family as you dedicate yourselves to a very noble goal, to inform, which is to breathe oxygen into societies. So thank you, and I'll take your questions. Now comes the hard part. It's easy to read something.
Would you please stand up so others can see you?
Can you tell me a little bit about yourself, your name, what you're doing?
Absolutely.
Hello, I'm Heather Hudson. I'm a second year public diplomacy student. And my question is, you mentioned that part of what we have to do is convince the American public that what we're doing is important. How do we do that? Like you said, we have limited resources. So how do you determine how much gets spent on public diplomacy abroad and how much convincing Americans that we need to do this?
Right. So one way you do it is, if you're the Undersecretary for Public Diplomacy, you might travel to Syracuse. And you might not only meet the students, but you might talk to the local television station, the local radio station, the local newspaper, the college newspaper, anyone who will listen. And maybe you'll go to USC, as I did last week, and you won't just meet with the converted. No, you should probably go downtown to Hollywood and meet with the creative artist community and ask them, where are you guys on freedom of expression? Since you benefit so much from it, why ask us to do all the hard work? It's your field. You have to defend it. Maybe you would go to Des Moines, where we went a couple of weeks ago to Drake University to talk to Japanese students. Because you know what? The number of Japanese students who come to the United States over the past 10 years is cut in half. 50% down. That's with a country that we have a 60-year relationship with. That's not right. So maybe what I need to do next is go to Tokyo, which we will do next month, and talk to those Japanese corporations and say, hey, you guys, pay for some more students to come to Drake and Ithaca and Syracuse and USC. Gotta go out and make the case that we will all be stronger if we work harder in a more integrated, coherent way to join in the conversation. So it's going to take some footwork, some miles, some travel, but we can do it.
Welcome, Madam Undersecretary. We're so happy to have you here. I'm Dennis Kinsey, the director of the Public Diplomacy Program here at the Newhouse School. And I want to get you mentioned the visitors and how important it is. I wondered really if you could elaborate a little bit on the importance of the foreign visitor program. As you know, we're involved in the Murrow program for international journalists, the Leaders for Democracy Fellows, so we're fairly active in that, and we think it is important, but I wondered if you would elaborate more on that.
The international exchange programs are the core of the experience that we're trying to create in the cultural and educational arena. When international students come here, they change the culture and the dinner table and the campus. And when our students go overseas, they change the dinner tables and the conversations and the cultures. But here's the thing. Congress these days wants to know what the facts are. You know, what do we really get from bringing all these students here? And for a long time, you could kind of explain it just the way we would. You get positive cultural and educational transformation. But now they want to get a little finer detail, like some quantitative metrics. So we've gone out and looked at what international students contribute to a local economy. In this state, in 1 year, the presence of international students contribute $2.5 billion to New York. I know, you're all really, how much are they buying? Where are they going? Across the United States last year, the presence of 775,000 international students generated $20 billion in this country. Can you imagine if we shut that off? Can you imagine if we didn't keep opening our doors to international exchanges in both directions? So, but we got to go out and explain it. It's not intuitive. It's not obvious. It's something we know and feel, but we're going to have to make the connections for people.
Thank you for your very interesting talk. I'm Bill Beeman. I'm going to be speaking this evening, so I hope that we'll have a chance to talk later. I have two questions, and I hope you don't mind I'm asking both of them. First is related to the previous question. We have a real problem in academia with international visitors. They can't get visas. We cannot hold international meetings in the United States any longer. I'm a Middle East specialist. Middle East Studies Association has essentially moved to Canada. We cannot meet here because of the visa problem. Same thing is true with International Artist Exchange. You can't bring a troupe of dancers here when half of them can't get visas. And I understand how the visa process works, but how in the world can you, in the area of public diplomacy, affect this? Because it hurts us as a nation, and it hurts our reputation abroad. One person with an unreasonable visa denial tells 10 people, and 10 people tell 10 more people, and finally people give up trying to even come. The second question I have is a little more historical. The United States Information Agency was closed many years ago, and I'm wondering how your agency picks up the slack from what was the function of the United States Information Agency. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to take them in reverse order. USia, I feel very strongly about tapping into the reservoir of talent from USia. There's still plenty of it. And whether it's on the Broadcasting Board of Governors or in the community at large, I spend a lot of time bringing together some of the knowledge of USia because it informs this entity within the State Department. The first is really important. We're off the record now, or is our reporter friends still here? So you don't want to talk about visas in public forum, get in real trouble. Well, so many roads lead through passports and visas. And one of the things when I first came in was people were talking about J1s and B2s and C6s and S come in under an S-12 plus, and whoa, I need a visa briefing. A to Z, literally. I also began to beat this drum about, wait a second. It doesn't really work if you can't get here. So we are taking a hard look at this. And I will tell you, and this, my staff will absolutely kill me for saying, but I spent a lot of time individually helping organizations overseas who get an individual stuck somewhere. And I will tell you, if it happens to you, you email us, because we're on to the embassies, and they don't like when the undersecretary calls and asks about so-and-so who's not getting their papers. And that's not an efficient way to handle this. But I will tell you something that's changing it, and is going to change it in the next few months. Travel and tourism is a new and growing sector that the U.S. would like to scale up. Normally, I would have nothing to do with park rangers and commerce and interior and travel, tourism, where you go in the United States. Now I do, because guess what? You can't travel and be a tourist here if you can't get your visa. So we're at that table, and we're pushing hard. We've just upped the wait time and numbers in Brazil and China. If you go online and put just those two countries in and visas, just happening. There are like 180 countries, though, and there is a lot of duplication of names I'm learning, and, you know, it's cumbersome. I think technology is going to help this quite a bit as new systems come online, but I can assure you we're on to this one. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ryan Martin from the Master's School. I'm working on 2 degrees, one in public administration and the other in international relations. I was hoping that you could elaborate a little bit on the work that you do, and perhaps do that by maybe a case study example. Could you tell us a little bit about the aftermath of the movie that created the protests in the Philippines? And what were the conversations like? How did you arrive at the decisions that you made and the actions that you took, including buying that time in Pakistan?
So the question is really about how we responded in the wake of that hateful, reprehensible video that made its way online and around the world and inflamed passions and led people to become, in some cases, violent. In some cases. In other cases, people saw the video and understood. I think we also have to remember that sometimes we don't hear the silent majority in countries, and we think that what we see on the evening news is everybody. And I've discovered that actually our cameras sometimes are not trained on the very peaceful people who don't make a lot of noise. But that's a separate talk. Pakistan is a good example of where the embassy was beginning to see lots of protests growing, and everybody's online and talking, and we had morning calls with every public affairs officer at every post could dial in and talk to our office and talk to public affairs every single morning. What's happening? What's going on? What do you need? Are you able to get out and about? Are you able to engage? What can we do to help you? And the key was to hear from the local post. Because we're sitting in Washington. We're not on the ground feeling whatever is happening. So you've got to first really trust your folks at embassies to recommend what they think the best course is. Now, in the case of Pakistan, the recommendation was, first of all, we need to get the President and the Secretary of State on tape and in a format we can start emailing and tweeting. Because here's the thing, the Secretary and President gave really wonderful remarks. They were kind of long remarks. And suddenly you have a medium that needs very short attention span content. So what we did was a mashup video of the Secretary and the President intertwined in a kind of interesting way, and TV producers think this way, kind of weave it together and make it really tight and get the key points out. The film did not come from the U.S. government. It's hateful, it's reprehensible, it's not us. We don't believe in violence, and we do believe in freedom of expression. Just those points alone needed to be said from the highest levels. But then someone has to see that in a local context. So our folks in Pakistan said, we got to air this on Pakistani television and cable, because in Pakistan, television is the way you communicate with people. But here's a little problem. They're not just going to run the President and Secretary of State because they feel like it. We're going to ask you buy public service announcement airtime. Ooh. We're going to ask us to spend a little money on this. didn't take me long to figure out, well, what's going to cost? What's the cost if the protests grow and grow and our embassy gets burned down? What's the cost if somebody's life is lost and we might just convince even one person to think twice? Or maybe some people who think we put this video out and need to hear directly that we didn't. And I said, go ahead. Air it. Pay the Pakistani channels. Put it on. That was controversial. And I know people read about it, and I know we got asked a lot of tough questions. I feel very comfortable explaining it to you and explaining it to anyone who asks, because we needed to get on the air fast. Hope that answers it.
Hi. So when you're talking about the ultimate goals of U.S. public diplomacy,
Would you stand up and introduce yourself?
The ultimate goals of U.S. public diplomacy seem to transcend petty party lines and things like that, but obviously we're on the eve of an election. And so how do you ensure, and how does your office ensure that domestic politics don't necessarily get in the way of you doing your job as Undersecretary of State?
It's an excellent question, and my answer is three-part. One, I remind myself every day that I was confirmed by a bipartisan vote in the Senate, and that this job of explaining America is really not a partisan thing. Really, no American wants violence and division, hostility, or we hope. And international citizens deserve to hear from us regardless of what party we're from. So I remind myself firstly that. The second thing is, there used to be this kind of water's edge thing that maybe Colonel Smullen remembers from our time 25 years ago at the Pentagon, where I was a reporter and he was on the official side. It was something about foreign policy or overseas stopping at the water's edge. I don't know what that is, but I still believe that you have to behave differently overseas. And the third is, I actually believe that when there's a crisis, the nation pulls together. And so I just go back to some good old-fashioned roots, that this is America's story. The values we hold of pluralism, democracy, freedom, inclusiveness are our story. And not to let the rest get in the way. And remember that we got to be in this for the long haul. And just ride the waves, let the noise and the clutter and the news and the fighting, just keep going. Because at the end of public diplomacy, somewhere is an engaged citizen who wants to live in a less divided global community that's more prosperous and more stable. And if we just put one foot in front of the other, keep walking.
Hello, Madam Secretary. Welcome to SU. My name is Cynthia Dennis, and I'm a 1969 graduate of the library school. Okay, so I think it's wonderful. One of the best ways that we'll have a peaceful world is the interchange among young people from all over the world. When I was young, there was no exchange program at all. But I want to follow up on the Mideastern experts' question. Now, there are young people in Afghanistan and young people in Pakistan, and the Afghans are called Afghan Youth for Peace. And they want to live in a world without war, as we do. Now, 3 applied through their organization for visas to come to this country to tell their story. And they were denied and denied. And also a Pakistan attorney who was representing Pakistan civilians who've been killed by the drones. He was also denied a visa. But thousands of people wrote in to your department, and you what's the word? You again looked over the application and decided that that gentleman could come to this country for a certain amount of time. And I wish, my prayer would be that you give another consideration for these youngsters from Afghan, because we really, just one last remark, we're like a village now on this planet. We just need to live in peace in order to survive, and there's so many wonderful traditions and everything. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for the question. And I will say two quick things. One, there are so many programs now. There used to be just the sort of Fulbright and the YES program. Now we have about 140 different programs. And so oftentimes individuals don't get attached to the right program where there's a sponsor and you can check and make sure everything happens. But one of the things our office is pretty good at is making sure these things are re-reviewed and making sure that the embassy is helping locally. In terms of Pakistan, I want to tell you one quick story. I went to Islamabad and Lahore, and I met with young women at an all-girls school. And some of the questions in the Q&A were pretty, I wouldn't say hostile, I would say forward-leaning. About NATO, drones, Bin Laden, lots of issues were on their mind. And some of them were pretty anti, I would say, in terms of American feeling. And it wasn't unexpected. It was in the middle of one of the most tense times where our border was blocked getting our supplies from Afghanistan through Pakistan. And there was lots of friction. So it wasn't the perfect public diplomacy setting the table moment, but I wanted to go regardless. And I did my best to field the questions. And I agreed to stay behind and meet with students afterwards and talk further. And they lined up in front. Almost everyone said, despite what I asked, I'm wondering, how do I get an application to one of those universities in the country? And I smiled and realized, this is the great human ambition, curiosity, a sense of wanting to be engaged. And as I say, we just have to stay at it, stay in it. Some days it feels like taking a fork to an iceberg. You're just chipping. But we have to keep chipping away. And people like you remind us that it pays off. So thank you.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. My name is Oliver Elliott. I'm also at the Maxwell School doing a joint degree in international relations and public administration. My question was more to the lens analogy that you used. What long-term issues do you see affecting U.S. diplomacy efforts, whether it's the U.S. economy, whether it's the rise of China, U.S. presence in the Middle East, with, in Afghanistan, drawdown in Iraq? What do you see as something that will really inhibit our efforts to engage in the world? And essentially, what keeps you up at night?
The lack of a domestic constituency worries me. Are we building enough in our new Congress that has to fund these programs? Are we making sure new members and their constituents understand what we're doing? Cost worries me. The expense of Japanese students getting here, getting on programs. Will we become too dependent on virtual technology and let it replace the face-to-face? Will we lose sight of the big picture and get bogged down in the technical issues and the political hot button? Will will all this click and tweet and blog end up as one giant endless conversation that doesn't produce any tangible result? Will we mistake an online conversation for an inhuman connection? Will we really think those are relationships, the way that you establish a relationship with people over 20, 30 years? Those issues, I worry, will we kind of miss the point and just end up in a big circle where we're just talking and retweeting the same thing around and around, so that it won't be new thinking, it will be amalgamated old thinking just under a new tweet banner. So, those things I think a lot about. How do we be fresh and new, innovative and inspiring, and not just retread? One more, because then I know I have to head to the airport and leave you all to your evening activities, but we should get a closing question.
Sure. Hi, my name is Maggie Moore. I'm a public diplomacy first-year student, and my question is, for students or people looking to enter the practice, do you think strength should lead towards developing strategic communication skills or a specific understanding knowledge base in a particular region or a language?
Well, one, all of us who work in this field are big believers in language. It's a gateway, it's a key. When I see resumes for young people who speak Urdu and Somali and Arabic, I jump across the table because I know that there is just no substitute for being able to communicate with someone in their native language. I think all of the public diplomacy young people I talk to will end up going in one of many directions, and they'll put one foot maybe in the foreign service, maybe they'll try civil service, they might go to an NGO, they might go to a PR firm, they might go to a foundation, they might go to a university, they might go to a corporation, and they'll all still be doing public diplomacy because they've been trained in this art and science, in this creative profession. They'll know that they have to engage and listen and interact, and they'll know that they're building a bridge, whether it's a company to an entrepreneur, or a student to a professor, or a religious scholar exchange. So I'm actually quite hopeful that you're getting the skills and the tools to succeed, however you choose to apply them. But please know that we back in the capital of the United States are working hard, and that we're accessible and available, and we'll be out there traveling next to the DR, the Dominican Republic, for a conference of binational libraries, and to Japan and Sarajevo and Turkey. So we will just keep moving forward and know that you're just a step behind us. So thanks very much.
I have the pleasure of, on behalf of the Chancellor and our two deans of Maxwell and Newhouse, to thank the Undersecretary, who I admire greatly, for all she does for us each and every day and in each and every way to help with this discourse that is so terribly important. Her time is extremely precious, and her wisdom, her vision, her insights are especially valuable to those who are preparing for that future that you talk about. I want to thank you so very much, Tara, for taking time to be with us today. More than anything, I want to thank you for your service to the nation and to the people of this nation, and to express our appreciation for all you do for us. Thank you.